Emotional abuse is incredibly complex, often hiding in plain sight behind someone's words and actions. The thing is, it's not always about screaming or physical harm. It's in those subtle signs, the sneaky digs disguised as jokes, the clever twists of reality that make you second-guess yourself. People often think of abuse as physical scars, yet emotional abuse cuts deep into the mind and heart, and because there are no visible bruises, it's easy for both the victim and outsiders to underestimate its weight. But here's the truth. This quiet, persistent pain can leave long-lasting damage no less severe than physical abuse. Let's break it down. Emotional abuse creeps in like a thief in the night. For example, think about that one friend who constantly downplays how their partner treats them, saying things like, "Oh, they didn't mean it," or "It's not that bad." Over time, they normalize red flags that should never be overlooked. And for those enduring it firsthand, there's this haunting feeling of being trapped in a maze, where every turn leaves you feeling more confused, unsure if it's real or just your imagination. Truthfully, emotional violence thrives in those gray areas where doubt festers. What makes this even more dangerous is silence, yours and theirs. It's easy to dismiss certain behaviors as quirks or bad days, but the longer this mistreatment goes unchecked, the more harm it does to self-esteem, confidence, and the basic sense of safety in life. And once you begin to notice those patterns, those little unsettling moments you can't shake, it stops being so subtle. This is just scratching the surface of how these dynamics work, but recognizing them is only the first step. Emotional abuse often hides behind a mask of normalcy, making it difficult to pinpoint. One of the most common tactics is gaslighting, where the abuser twists reality to make the victim doubt their own perceptions. Phrases like, "You're overreacting," or "That's not how it happened," are designed to distort your memory and erode your confidence. They'll also slip in cruel jokes under the guise of humor, belittling you while claiming, "I was just joking, don't be so sensitive," and the pattern continues. They might explode with rage one moment and act like nothing happened the next, pretending everything is fine while leaving you emotionally unsteady. The abuser's behavior is often a dizzying mix of extremes, creating what's called the cycle of abuse. It starts with belittlement and manipulation, where they ignore your feelings or shift blame onto you for their actions. "If you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have gotten angry," they'll say, making you feel responsible for their outbursts. Then, just when you're ready to walk away, they shift to affection. It's those rare moments of kindness that make you question yourself. Maybe they're not so bad after all. This back and forth creates a false hope, binding you even tighter to the relationship. What makes this even more disorienting is the duality of the abuser's persona. In public, they're charming and charismatic, drawing admiration from friends and family. At home, though, they're cold, critical, and sometimes cruel, like two completely different people. This contrast makes you feel isolated because when you confide in anyone, you hear things like, "They seem so nice." Are you sure this isn't just you being too sensitive? And that doubt plants itself deep, adding to the confusion and self-blame? It's a painful cycle, one that takes a toll the longer it goes unnoticed. The effects of emotional abuse often feel like carrying an invisible weight. Victims experience an overwhelming sense of confusion and self-doubt, constantly questioning whether they're the problem. One moment, you're certain something is wrong. The next, you're second-guessing yourself because of the way your feelings were dismissed or minimized. It's a mental tug-of-war that leaves you exhausted, unsure if you're overthinking or genuinely being mistreated, and that confusion isn't accidental. It's the abuser's way of keeping control, leaving you endlessly tangled up in your own head. Over time, this cycle fuels isolation, a hallmark symptom of abuse. You might find yourself pulling away from friends or family, partly because you're too exhausted to explain things, and partly because you're embarrassed. How do you articulate the subtle jabs, the silent treatments, or that constant feeling of walking on eggshells? So, instead of seeking support, you stay quiet. But silence only deepens the loneliness, making emotional abuse feel like a prison you can't escape. You start to believe you're the only one going through this, which couldn't be further from the truth. One of the strongest binds in an emotionally abusive relationship is a trauma bond, an unhealthy attachment formed through the abuser's cycle of punishment and reward. Think about those fleeting moments when they're kind, apologizing, and promising change. Those moments, however rare, keep you holding on, hoping things will return to how they were in the beginning. But those moments are like breadcrumbs. Just enough to keep you searching, but never enough to nourish you. And while your heart craves love and connection, your body is stuck in a constant state of emotional stress, bracing for the next storm. It's a vicious cycle, but one that can absolutely be broken. Victims of emotional abuse often find themselves clinging to excuses to make sense of the chaos. One of the most common rationalizations is normalization, believing that nobody's perfect or that arguments and mistreatment are just a part of every relationship. Phrases like, "It's not that bad," or "Everyone has flaws," become a mantra as they try to minimize what's happening. This mindset makes it easier to ignore the growing red flags, even when deep down, something feels undeniably wrong. It's a form of survival, the mind's way of coping with a reality that feels too painful to confront head-on. Another justification victims often make is tied to the idea that love equals sacrifice. They tell themselves that real love means enduring hardship, putting the other person first, and working through challenges, no matter how toxic they may be. But here's the tough truth. These beliefs stem from a place of insecurity, often rooted in past experiences where love was conditional. Victims may find themselves thinking, "If I just try harder to keep the peace or meet their needs, things will get better." But in reality, this line of thinking only deepens the imbalance in an already unhealthy dynamic. Lastly, there's the tendency to internalize the abuser's pain. Victims might say, "They're just acting this way because of their past trauma," or "They had a tough childhood, so I should be more understanding." While it's true some people carry emotional scars, it doesn't excuse harmful behavior. The more the victim works to accommodate the abuser, walking on eggshells just to keep the peace, the more they lose themselves in the process. And the harsh irony, even with all this effort, the abuse doesn't stop. This unrelenting cycle often leaves victims wondering, what more can I possibly do to fix this? Leading us directly into the heart of why breaking out feels so impossibly hard. The cycle of abuse is a maddening loop that keeps victims stuck, wondering if things will ever get better. It often starts with hurtful behavior, whether it's gaslighting, yelling, or manipulation. Followed by a fleeting moment of reconciliation, the abuser might apologize, shower you with affection, or promise that things will change. For a moment, there's hope, like a light at the end of a very dark tunnel. But before long, the tension builds again, and the mistreatment resurfaces. The cycle repeats, leaving the victim emotionally drained but still holding on to the belief that the good moments can return for good. Shame and guilt only tighten the grip of this toxic dynamic. Many victims feel as though leaving would mean they gave up or failed to make the relationship work. Others are overwhelmed by the feeling that they're somehow to blame for their partner's actions. "If I had just communicated better, maybe things wouldn't have escalated," they think. And then there's the fear of abandonment. The gnawing worry that walking away will push the abuser into the arms of someone else, who they'll treat better. It's a cruel trap, one that preys on the vulnerability created by months or years of emotional turmoil. But perhaps the most exhausting part is the imbalance of effort. It feels like running a marathon. You're putting in all the work, bending over backward to mend things, while the abuser refuses to budge. They ignore boundaries, deflect blame, and meet emotional pleas with cold detachment or outright hostility. This disproportionate weight creates a crushing sense of futility. Victims often think, "How can I leave if they're not willing to meet me halfway?" But recognizing this unfair dynamic is the first step to understanding what's really at play, and beginning to see the difference between love and control. True love and emotional abuse can sometimes feel deceptively similar, especially in a relationship's early stages. Love, when it's real, rests on the foundation of respect, empathy, and consistency. It's about two people taking responsibility for their actions, apologizing when needed, and making reparations to strengthen the bond. Love doesn't just say, "I'm sorry," it follows up with change. It's steady, not sporadic. It honors your vulnerabilities instead of weaponizing them. In contrast, abuse thrives on control and intimidation, where the abuser's primary goal isn't connection, but dominance. One of the clearest differences lies in the presence or absence of green flags. True love makes you feel safe to express yourself without fear of retaliation. It allows for honest, difficult conversations about feelings or boundaries while still maintaining mutual respect. Abusive relationships, however, lack this safety. Power dynamics skew in one direction. You might be told that your emotions are too much or dismissed entirely, leaving you questioning if your needs even matter. Love listens and values your input. Abuse silences it to maintain control. Sometimes, the hardest part is accepting that you're in a relationship devoid of these green flags when you're trapped in manipulative cycles. It's easy to cling to the good times, believing that they invalidate the bad. But think about it this way. If your connection rests on occasional moments of kindness, is it enough to outweigh the harm? True love doesn't leave you walking on eggshells or doubting your worth. It doesn't push, pull, or destabilize. It offers safety, respect, and emotional reciprocity. And if those elements are missing, maybe it's time to rethink what real love looks like. Emotional abuse often whispers before it shouts, sneaking in through subtle signs that are easy to overlook. One of the most common is gaslighting, a deliberate attempt to make you doubt your own reality. Statements like "you're too sensitive," "that never happened," or "you're imagining things" leave you spiraling with questions. These phrases chip away at your self-trust, making you second-guess even your most basic instincts. Over time, you begin to feel confused and disconnected from the person you once were. Another red flag is the intentional isolation that abusive partners create without you even noticing. It starts off small, discouraging you from spending time with certain friends or making you feel embarrassed about sharing details of your relationship. Before you know it, your support system shrinks, leaving you feeling alone and without a lifeline. Pair this with manipulative behavior like emotional explosions or the silent treatment, and you're left walking on eggshells, desperate not to provoke them. The message becomes clear: keep quiet or you'll pay the price. What's even more insidious are the covert tactics of control, such as dismissing your accomplishments, mocking your interests, or questioning your decisions in a tone of contempt. It might not seem like a big deal at first, just an eye roll or a sarcastic comment, but those little moments pile up, deepening your emotional exhaustion. Abuse doesn't always come in loud, dramatic bursts. Sometimes, it's the quiet erosion of self-worth that does the most damage. Recognizing these small yet significant signs is crucial, but what comes next? The decision to act can feel like an uphill battle. Recognizing emotional abuse is one thing, but taking steps toward clarity and change requires deep reflection. One of the most powerful first steps is asking yourself direct questions. Do I feel safe in this relationship? Does this person value my emotions and perspectives? Is there consistent respect and support in how we treat each other? These questions aren't always easy to answer because abuse clouds judgment, but they're essential for uncovering truths you may have been avoiding. And sometimes, just sitting with these questions can illuminate patterns you hadn't noticed before. Another step is understanding the key difference between someone who's willing to change and someone who isn't. A healthy partner might not always have the tools to repair conflict perfectly, but they'll want to try. They'll listen, take accountability, and genuinely care about making things better. On the other hand, an abusive partner shows no desire to reflect, repair, or grow. Instead, they'll deflect blame, escalate conflict, or punish you for even daring to bring up your needs. The distinction: a healthy connection thrives on mutual respect. An abusive one feeds on dominance and control. But here's the tricky part. What if you realized that the answers to those questions don't align with what you hoped? This is where the thoughts of setting boundaries often arise. The fear of speaking up, though, is all too real, especially when you're unsure of the other person's reaction. Taking action doesn't have to mean confrontation right away. It can mean educating yourself, seeking out support, and redefining the standards of what you're willing to tolerate. These small steps matter and can help prepare you for the larger choices ahead. And sometimes, those choices mean looking at the relationship with new eyes. Eyes that see what's truly missing. Facing the truth about an emotionally abusive relationship can be one of the hardest steps to take. It begins with a brave admission. This relationship doesn't feel safe or healthy for me. That realization brings mixed feelings: fear, sadness, and even guilt. The idea of leaving might feel unthinkable, especially if you've invested years of love and effort. Or, the thought of staying might weigh heavily, knowing that the cycle of neglect and mistreatment isn't going to change. Either path feels like a mountain to climb, but staying silent about your pain is a choice you can't afford to keep making. At this point, you may find yourself questioning, can this relationship improve with time, Or is it time to leave for your emotional survival? Leaving doesn't mean you gave up. It means you valued yourself enough to walk away from something that was breaking you. Alternatively, staying requires boundaries. Very firm boundaries that protect your well-being and set clear standards for how you deserve to be treated. But here's the kicker. Boundaries only work in relationships where mutual respect exists. If the response to your limits is more control, intimidation, or dismissal, that's your answer. The truth is, neither staying nor leaving will feel easy. Both paths have challenges that require courage and patience. But one carries greater hope: the ability to reclaim your freedom, rebuild your self-worth, and rediscover what healthy love looks like. And here's where things can shift. When you look past the fear of ending it or staying stuck, you're left with the one undeniable fact. It's not about them anymore. It's about you. So, what's next? The answer often depends on how much more you're willing to endure or whether you're ready to rewrite the story you've been living. If you're reading this and it feels like your story, let me say this loud and clear. You're not crazy, weak, or alone. The feelings of confusion, shame, and guilt you've been carrying are not your fault. Victims of emotional abuse often hold themselves to impossible standards, shouldering the blame for a dynamic that was never theirs to fix. But here's the truth: you deserve love that feels safe, nurturing, and mutual. It's not too much to want kindness and consistency. It's the bare minimum. So, let go of the idea that this is all you're worth, because you are worth so much more. There's real power in acknowledging your situation and opening up to trusted resources for help, whether that's a close friend, a family member, or a professional therapist. Healing starts with allowing yourself to be vulnerable and breaking the silence that's been keeping you isolated. And if the shame of staying in an abusive relationship for too long is holding you back, here's a thought: survival is not weakness. Every day you've made it through is proof of your strength. The next step doesn't require perfection, just the small, brave act of choosing yourself. So, where do you go from here? Maybe it starts with writing down your thoughts, setting that first boundary, or even just Googling a support hotline. Little steps build momentum. And remember, walking away doesn't mean failure. It means you're choosing to live the life you deserve. This isn't about hate or revenge. It's about focusing on your own growth, your own healing, and reclaiming your emotional safety. Speaking of growth, have you ever wondered what genuine love might feel like? That's the kind of love you're working toward, even if it feels far away right now. Now that you've uncovered the hidden layers of emotional abuse, the real question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you keep tolerating the pain, brushing off those subtle signs, hoping things will magically get better? Or will you choose to stand up for yourself, set boundaries, and demand the love and respect you've always deserved? Change is terrifying, no doubt about it. But staying stuck in a toxic cycle robs you of the life you're meant to live. What would it feel like to finally break free from the stress, doubt, and manipulation that's been holding you back? The truth is, healing doesn't happen overnight. But every courageous step you take, whether it's reaching out to a friend, seeking therapy, or simply saying no to toxic behavior, builds the foundation for something better. Start asking yourself the hard questions. Do I feel safe here? Am I being respected? Is this relationship nourishing or draining me? Answering these honestly is your roadmap to clarity and action. Remember, it's not just about identifying the problem. It's about believing you deserve more and making the decision to pursue that. If this message hit home for you, don't let it end here. Take the first step toward your emotional freedom today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because your journey is just beginning and you're not alone in this. Together, we can learn more about healthy love, safe boundaries, and rebuilding your confidence one step at a time. So, what's stopping you from taking control? Let's make this the moment you decide to rewrite your story.